Hi, I'm here today with City Council President Mike Passero in the City Council chambers, which is why I'm wearing a blazer. Normally I save this for funerals and weddings, but I thought it would be appropriate for our interview today. How are you today?
I'm fine.
Very good. Your biography, I was reading up a little bit on, lived in the city your whole life?
That's correct.
Your father worked at EB?
Yeah, he was 20-year Navy.
20-year Navy? And
yeah, that's how the family ended up here.
Then retired from EB?
Then he retired and decided, actually he retired to stay in New London because we were getting moved to Newport.
Okay.
I remember as a small child checking out apartments in Newport. So my life would have certainly been different if I lived in Newport.
And
sure.
you graduated from Conn College with a bachelor's and associates and off to UConn for a master's, is that right?
Actually, no. I got my BA at Connecticut College, and then I went back about 10 years later and got my master's in English literature. And then I went to the University of Connecticut School of Law.
For law?
Yeah. I had a choice, really, to work on my PhD or the opportunity to go to law school.
Right.
So.
And somewhere along the line, you ran for city council. This is your second term? In city council?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I wanted to talk to you about a lot of the issues that are pressing in the city. One of those being Fort Trumbull. I'm sorry, Riverside Park.
Okay.
I read in your campaign for mayor that you had a pretty nuanced position on Riverside Park. Would you like to state your position on Riverside Park at this point?
What do you mean by nuanced position?
Well, I mean, it seemed to me like you were able to want to be able to, treat the Coast Guard as an important part of the community, but you didn't want to do it at the expense of the people living in Riverside Park, around Riverside Park, or the park itself.
Yeah, that's essentially my problem with the process. I opposed it from the very beginning. The minute I heard about it first in executive session, and I was flabbergasted that it was even under consideration. But when I looked around the room, I could see it was like an oh my God moment. Right. These people are actually considering this. And the proposal at the beginning was to sell the whole park, and the Coast Guard had no real intentions of using it, of utilizing the land.
Right.
They had, it was going to be at least 10 years before they saw any hope on the horizon for any funds to expand, but they wanted to, I think they essentially just wanted to, acquire the property for the future and sort of put it in the bank. And I just did not see any way that was in the city's interest to do that.
And so where we are now with the park is we had a referendum and kind of narrowly defeated selling the park after a recount. And one of the reasons I had begun doing these interviews, my first one was with Kathleen Mitchell, was because I had heard that there was this number of $15 million to sell the park. And from a few different sources, a few different avenues, heard that this was legitimate, like this was something that was going to happen, not now.
Well, there's been, I can't operate on rumors, and there's so many rumors. There's so many rumors, and unfortunately, part of the way, the political game is played is to start rumors.
Right.
My understanding, the only facts that I know is the Coast Guard had $3 million. It had to be spent by September 30th, 2010, I think, or September 30th, 2011. No, excuse me, September 30th, 2010. I get my years mixed up. And so the contract was signed in time, and then we had to wait nearly a year for the referendum, or over a year for the referendum. So, but they had to get that contract signed, or they were going to lose the $3 million that they had to purchase that park. So that's it. There's no more money. I mean, even the Coast Guard cannot come up with $15 million just like that on a whim to purchase a park from somebody. The other problem with that theory is, and I have no reason to doubt them, but at the time we were told that the law would not allow them to pay more for that land than market value as woodland, as parkland. Because obviously, 18 acres, if it was valued for its development rights, would be a tremendously high value. And actually, that piece of property reminds me of the credit card commercial. I mean, priceless. I don't know how you set a value on that, really, especially in this day and age, to find 18 acres like that along a river that's undeveloped and actually in its natural state.
Yeah.
It's a remarkable asset.
So there is no price tag that's enough for it, in your opinion?
No, and I don't think that you decide to give up an asset like that just because maybe people the city isn't taking care of it.
Sure.
So
I agree with you, and there are people who don't, and you know, that's very much part of
now, on the other side, I mean, the other side of the issue is the value of the Coast Guard Academy to this city, and the identity of the city with the Coast Guard. I mean, I've grown up really infatuated with that institution. I took classes there when I was at Conn College. There was, if you went to school at Conn College, they let you take classes at the Coast Guard Academy and vice versa. This was back in the late 70s. So I studied navigation there, for one, and I grew up really watching Bark Eagle come and go. My parents used to take me down as a kid to see it. I always wanted to see it with the sail,
I take my sons.
sail set.
I take my sons down there too.
Yeah, I don't ever remember. I mean, every time it came and went as a child, I dreamed to see the sail set and sailing it to the river, and never did. Actually, the first time I saw it with its sail set was Opsail 2000. So you don't get that opportunity even if you live in New London all your life. But no, it's an important institution. The problem with the Riverside sales debate was there was never really an exploration of the issues regarding the need for the academy to expand and how the city could accommodate the expansion needs. It was simply a matter of a sales contract for the park. And I believe there should have been a larger debate on land use and what we can do for them apart from giving up this park. If you study all the options and you come down that that's the only possible way to satisfy the needs of this institution, that's another issue. But we didn't even start that debate.
We didn't have the dialogue.
No.
And so this issue becomes kind of a hot button issue during the election, right? The referendum's on the table as to whether or not to sell the park, and it appears that the vote split pretty evenly amongst people who would want to sell the park.
Well, you know, I my theory on that is, and I have no evidence of this, but my gut reaction on what happened in the vote is, Mike Passero was running a write-in campaign, and as far as write-in campaigns go, his was enormously successful to get, you know, I think over 1,000 write-in votes, and to be the second highest vote getter in that election was amazing. And if you remember, one of the ways he did it was he had sample ballots out there, and he was having actual classes or instructions in how to fill in the ballot. Right. And you or I might have thought, wow, who doesn't know how to fill in a ballot? You know, that's ridiculous, right? But as it turns out, very intelligent, sophisticated people went into that ballot, went into the polls, and never found, and were, you know, intending to vote on the Riverside Park referendum issue, and left the polls without doing it because they never found it on the ballot. They didn't come across it. They didn't come.
600 people, yes.
Yeah, they didn't come across it because it looked like a banner up in the margin, on the top margin of the thing, and you could have missed it. Now, the 1,000 or so people that went into the polls intending to write in a ballot for Mike Passero, when they were being instructed on how to do that, they were also instructed to fill in yes on the ballot question. So those 1,000 people were prepared to vote. And as good a job as the Friends of Riverside Park did and the other allies to save the park, we did not hold any lessons in how to fill out the ballot or where to find the ballot question, and it turns out that that's probably what should have been done. But, you know, I think, to his credit, Mike Passero, he was running for mayor, but he was also on the yes side, and he was probably the most effective advocate for selling the park, as it turns out. And that's, I think, but for that campaign, I don't think the vote would have even been close. I think it would have been overwhelming to save the park.
Right. And Kathleen Mitchell asserted the same thing.
Really?
Not as well, or as clear.
Kathleen, did you hear that?
Well, not as clearly, I mean, but you know, she said the same thing, and her conclusion was the same. But I think you explained it a little further. And I guess my broader point would be, as that was injected into the politics of the campaign, and now whether or not, I don't want to operate on rumors either, but it might be that this comes up again, this issue, if the rumors have any truth to them at all. And how would we now have that broader discussion that you wanted to have, that we never really got to have, which is a really important one, which is that, one, the Coast Guard's valuable, and there's a large segment of the community that values it at a very high level, and they should be heard. But also that there's a neighborhood there, and there are families there, and there are people who love the park, and like you said, to people who kind of hold that sacred, you know, this land that can't be replaced.
Well, that part of the debate continues.
Right.
And I think it's healthy. There's going to, there's a lot of good that's going to come out of this. It might have been a wedge. It might have been a wedge during the year or more, 14 months when we were waiting for the referendum. It might have got heated, and it might have been a wedge in the community. But now that issue's over and decided, what we're left with is the movement to reinvigorate, East New London, Hodges Square. And there's a lot of activity doing that. The park's going to be a really important part of that effort. If you go up there to this day, it's hard to even recognize the park from what it was a year ago. The amount of work that's done, and it's beautiful. And we had a professor from UConn in this at a city council meeting within the last month or so, and he reported on the results of a study they've done on options for improving Riverside Park, and he compared it to Central Park in New York City. And I had never thought of that comparison, but if you're up at the park and you look at it, you can think of it like that. It's just a wonderful, natural, passive recreation area, and it should stay that way, but it does need some improvements. But the park will help to regenerate the neighborhood, and the Coast Guard has an interest, and I spoke with the Admiral about this. They have a real interest in seeing the Hodges Square neighborhood brought back to life. They'd like to see it more of as an off-campus community for the students of both institutions, Connecticut College and the Academy. And as far as the Academy's expansion needs, there's plenty of options. I believe there are plenty of options. It's a matter of sitting down and laying out all the options. And if they need to expand, pursuing the options that are available. For instance, there's a blighted neighborhood just to the south of Riverside Park along Eastern Avenue. It's an industrial area. It's pretty run down. To my knowledge, there's no plans for it. And the land would arguably cost real money as opposed to what Riverside Park was going to be sold for. But it certainly would be valuable to the city to have that area improved, and it would be one possibility for Coast Guard expansion, and it's essentially contiguous. The only difference is you'd have to walk they have a gate that enters Riverside Park at the southeast corner of their property, yep. And you'd have to go from that gate to the gate at the southeast corner of Riverside Park.
Well, one last question, just as kind of a follow-up, because I think you really clearly and quite nicely stated your position, and I like your position, so we can kind of move away from it. That area that you're referring to, that's the blighted, is that designated as blighted at this point? Is this
I'm not. No, it's industrial.
It's industrial. Okay.
Right. So there's the old shipyard there, and there's on the east side of the tracks, there's quite a bit of usable land. That was the staging area when they just rebuilt the train bridge over the Thames. It's been used for different things. It was used when they were building the ferries at the old shipyard. So it's essentially the old shipyard property. But the waterfront piece of that is fabulously valuable land. In fact, it's deep water, bulkheaded waterfront. So
seems like a good alternative, right? Another thing Kathleen and I discussed was her role in the lawsuit against Chief Ackley and the emails she exchanged between Darrell herself and Chief Ackley and herself, and those being surrendered over to the Lynch case. I guess I'm not going to ask you to get into the specifics of lawsuits that the city is involved in, but
which I know very little about.
Right, but I guess more from a citizen to my counselor, I voted for you.
Thank you.
It's a mess in there. You're welcome. It's a mess in the police department. From the outside observer's perspective, it seems like, well, one, we have the FBI and the state to do an investigation. We're hearing a lot of
which
news.
I don't know anything about officially.
And okay, and well, I read about it in in different places.
I've only heard about it from one source, and I've never been able to verify it, so
okay.
I don't know if it's true.
Well, the appearance seems to be like there's a problem within the department, and Ackley and Finizio very much seem to be framing the conversation one way, and a camp that seems to be, I want to phrase this the right way, working with then Councilor Passero and to some extent, I don't know how much those ties are still existing. From what I understand of the lawsuit, and this is just what I understand, I'm not a lawyer, there's an argument of impropriety that Ackley inserted herself into the political campaigning end of it, which she wasn't allowed to do under a federal law, and I wish I remember the name of it.
The Hatch Act.
The Hatch Act. My argument would be, and this is not really in defense one way or another, it's just, again, trying to find a balanced perspective. Before Finizio was really on the scene, then Councilor Passero kind of launched a campaign to support Bill Dittman for the chief of police. And there seemed to be an adversarial relationship in the media. I heard radio interviews, I read pieces and quotes, and he seemed to kind of use his political position to, I don't want to say undermine her job, but definitely to make it clear that she wasn't the one he thought should have the job. That being said, it seems as though she had been injected into the situation politically, and I'm trying to think, not even from a legal standpoint, but from a citizen standpoint, is this that inappropriate of a reaction? If you're the chief of police and you've got a sitting councilor kind of coming after you, what should your response be? And I mean, it's to be sorted out for the lawyers, I suppose, but for the rest of us watching, we're trying to figure out, you know, how do we end up with a police department that is running well, that is healthy, that is managed well, that is accountable to the citizens. And much like on the Riverside Park issue, I'm trying to find this kind of really balanced place where the two camps, however they're defined, and I don't really want to define them, I just see them as there, don't tear apart the fabric of the society. I mean, law and order being one of those really important components.
The way I'm looking at the issue is there's pre-election and there's post-election.
Okay.
And since the election was over, Mike Passero left the field of play. So, and the damage that's been done, if you want to describe it, to the police department has been done post-election. So we lost, and it's cost the taxpayers of this city dearly, and will be costing us dearly for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. We're talking about a loss of money and of talent. One thing I want to share with you is I also have a life on the streets in New London. And I believe that the police department, you know, their jobs in law enforcement, you know, on the street is not being jeopardized right now. I don't see any difference. And so I live that one life, you know, as just a firefighter, you know, and so I work with the patrolmen. So on that level, the level that's important to you and important to public safety is functioning very well. And we have really, I'm not just blowing smoke, we have great people down there. I wish they hadn't lost so much talent in the upper part of the department, all in one fell swoop. I just believe that was reckless from a money point of view and from a management point of view. But it's not my call on the council. I know. That's the administration side of the city. And so it is what it is. Council's left to deal with the repercussions, so to speak. We have to deal with the money fallout, and we have to deal with the restructuring issues now as the department tries to rebuild its management structure. The good part in this is I believe that when you get down to the level of the patrolman on the street doing the job, the most important element of your police department, it's working well. Yes. They're professionals, they're doing their job. I'm not sure, I can't answer questions about morale, but I can tell you that they're professionals, and when they're doing their job, they're doing it.
You mentioned you were 28-year veteran of the fire department. I'm going to ask.
I didn't mention the number of years, but you did.
I did. I'm sorry. You mentioned you were a veteran. I knew you were a 28-year veteran. I'm going to ask a question, and it might be a little bit of a difficult subject, so I'm going to try to do it with as much kind of honor for our firefighters as possible. You've been there 28 years. Mm-hmm. The Mayo situation is big right now, but it's kind of shining light on a much bigger problem that's been there for 30 years, and that we haven't had any minority hires in 30 years.
That's not accurate.
Okay, can you explain to me how it's inaccurate?
It's inaccurate because we have had minority hires.
Okay.
I work with one of the you know, one of the probably the greatest firefighter we have, one of the best, young kid named Cain Rosado, who's Hispanic. And he's the kid that when the last time there was attempted suicide off the Gold Star Bridge, next time you're driving over the Gold Star Bridge, see if you'd ever have the guts to climb over that fence. Right. And he did that to stop this guy from jumping. And it's just amazing. So, you know, and he's not, yeah, he is still. And at that time, I believe we hired 2 or 3 minorities. So, I mean, the facts aren't accurate. Well, I don't want to defend the hiring practices in the city, because you can go look up a guest editorial I wrote, which, you know, took a good degree of courage to do it. But I'm on record on this issue, and I have been on record for a long time because I was a union officer. The other thing that's inaccurate is the people in the city should not blame the members of the department for the hiring practices, because right, and we are on the streets and we are getting blamed and we are catching the flack, and people have to understand we have no say in who they send to work with us. I do understand. Now we're fortunate that we, while there has been arguably a lack of diversity, there hasn't been a lack of talent. We are hiring just a fabulous professional staff, and they're serving us well. I mean, I'm a little jilted. I've been there for 28 years, but I've seen the change, and the fire department in this city, I think from, you can look at it from an objective perspective, and I don't think you're going to find any criticism about our performance and what we do. What you got to do is you've got to try to find that degree of talent, but add diversity to the mix. And that's the challenge. Well, it shouldn't be that difficult. I mean, I don't see why it's a problem, but as far as why we haven't had better diversity over the years, that responsibility is shared by a lot of people. Over probably 25 years or more, there's been any number of personnel directors through that amount of time, and any number of mayors and city councils. And these positions, all of the rest of it has been a diverse group of people, and nobody has addressed the problem.
And so in that regard, I would like to say that I really only know what I've had discussions with people on the street as well, and what I've read in the newspaper. And so maybe the issue is there hasn't been an African American hired in 30 years, and that there's been other minorities. And I think it's important to point out that, you know, just because there hasn't been an African American, there has been other minorities. It's something I really wasn't aware of, and I'm glad to be aware of it. But I do want to, in that vein, conceding that point to you, and that you say that there is a lack of diversity to an extent, come up with maybe some sorts of, and not here in the interview, obviously, we're not going to be able to solve it, but come up with a discussion like in Riverside where we can weigh all these points and say, what kind of outreach can we do to the students? Because I mean, one of the issues...
Well, let me interrupt you. We've already started that. Mr. Allen up at the STEM Magnet High School has partnered with Three Rivers Community College, and they're going to, in September, they're starting to offer classes in fire technology. Fire technology is a degree that you can earn, a college degree. They offer the classes at Three Rivers. They offer the classes at the University of New Haven. They're going to offer the classes to the high school kids at the Magnet High School, and they'll be able to get their high school credits plus credits towards college, and plus they get exposed to public safety careers. And I think it's not just the fire service. So I went to the first meeting with the students to introduce them to the program a week or 2 ago, it was a good crowd of probably 20 or 25 students. A great deal of diversity in the room, so I think that program is going to be successful. One of the problems in New London is we don't have a volunteer fire department, and that's usually where youth that are interested in pursuing a career in fire service start out. They start out as teenagers serving in the volunteer fire department, and we don't have that in New London. And in the towns where there is volunteer fire departments, there isn't diversity like there is in New London. So that's part of the problem. So we have to find a way to replace that system with something different, and we might be able to do it through the high school. So there are issues. I mean, part of the problem is in that 25 years, there's been a lot of hiring. Where was everybody for 25 years? Well, and I'll tell you, I can remember distinctly being, as a union officer, being back in the personnel office 15 years ago, talking to a personnel director at the time who was a person of color, and saying to him, what's going on here? Why is there, and nobody really cared, to be honest with you.
I think that's all part of it. So, I mean, I believe that there is a power imbalance in the racial structure in the city and in the country to an extent that nobody really wants to talk about. And I think it has less to do with active racist discrimination and more to do with systemic problems that arise from a city is an urban, we're the only urban center, district deemed so by the federal government in the southeastern Connecticut, which means we have a diverse enough ethnic population and a diverse enough income population to be, urban. So in the predominantly white towns and cities, they have volunteer fire departments, and so the citizens there whose children volunteer are predominantly white, and they're better suited. And so I guess I want to kind of talk to, the point that, and I don't want to get into Mayo too specifically.
Well, I can't get into that specifically because I don't have the.
And so I'm not going to.
I'm not involved in that decision.
But I guess I want to say, aside from whether or not he's acceptable, which I will say evidence hasn't been shown to me that he isn't necessarily, but I'm not saying all the evidence is out. But aside from that point.
By the way, I have no more evidence than you have.
And
because counsel's not involved.
No, and I'm not asserting that you do, and I don't want to involve you in it. But what I want to say is, why was he the only black candidate at the fire academy? You know what I mean? So these are, and I'm not asking you to answer that. This is kind of the context I want to put this question into. When we say where was anybody for 25 years, it's true. And I'm here now, and I have something to say about it. And I guess I'm looking for these kind of answers.
I don't know that there's really a boogeyman here. Right. It's certainly, I don't believe is any kind of racism. I think it's they've just had a difficult time attracting candidates, and that I think that they just have to try harder. And do a better job. And I think by starting in the high school and developing more interest in the field at an early stage might help too. Now, I heard the police chief say something interesting at the budget hearing on Monday, which was that she wanted to focus on hiring locally the next time she hires in the police department. And I think that's a really good attitude to have, and we should have that in the fire department too. All of the jobs now are drawing candidates from all over the state and really all over the region. These are good jobs, and there should be some way to give the children of our citizens in New London first opportunities for these great jobs, provided they're qualified, provided they're going to be as good candidates as anybody else. All things being equal, I don't think our people are getting a fair shot right now.
I think I'm going to steer towards the budget, but within the budget conversation, I would like to have a broader conversation about the story we're all telling here in New London, right? We're here, we're all together, we're mixed up, we've got the old traditions, which I think should be valued, we've got the Coast Guard, which should be valued, we have diverse cultural aspects which should be valued, economic aspects should be valued, but we've switched forms of government. I guess this is where the story gets interesting, and we've gone from the council to the mayor. We've got a mayor who's come in, and I think I've heard you say, or heard someone say you said, that we are all invested in the success of this mayor, and that you want to see him succeed. I voted for him as well, and I want to see him succeed as well. So in regards to this pretty large budget issue which exists in the city, and to appeal to you as the president of the city council, how are you and the mayor on this issue and other issues going to come to that common ground where we're serving the citizens of New London rather than our own egos? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. It's a fair question. I'm not in this for my ego. I really don't need it, to be honest with you. I'm in this simply as a New London person, basically. And we are pretty far apart, I think, right now. His idea of spending in the city is nowhere in line with mine, and that's pretty clear. The budget increase that he's put on the table is not anywhere near acceptable. And to answer your question, I'm going to do my job on council, working with my 6 colleagues, and we're going to go over this budget. And we've only had one session so far. We have a long way to go, and we're essentially going to spend the month of April on it. I'm hoping that we'll be able to pare it way back. And then I'll just hope that the mayor understands that the citizens in New London do not want the municipal budget increased by $4 or $5 or $6 million. It's not acceptable. We've always lived rather, close to the edge here in New London, money-wise. I think I'm not prepared to change that philosophy. The only way we can grow the municipal budget in this city is if we grow our economic base, grow the grand list, bring businesses in, fill up the storefronts downtown, provide for more apartments downtown so we get more people living downtown. We need to grow our economic base. That's the way you're going to grow the budget. You're not going to grow this budget on the back of the existing taxpayers. It cannot happen. I don't think the mayor understands the position he's putting the small businesses in the city in, the people that are on a fixed income. I don't think he understands the pain that he's going to inflict on them by the type of tax increase that he proposed. It's just not acceptable.
Now, that being said,
you have to prepare yourself for cuts.
Right.
And part of the reason you're going to be in more pain than you had to be is because the budget this year was blown so far out of the water. It is completely unacceptable.
When you say blown out of the water, what are you referring to?
Well, nearly $500,000 alone in to get rid of people in the police department that there was a desire to get rid of but no need to get rid of. So there's $500,000 right there.
Okay.
And you can just keep adding it up. I don't know, to be honest with you, where all the money went. And I'm not blaming this administration solely because for me, a lot of it has to do with the transition. And we've been in a transition for more than a year. And it created problems. Certainly this administration shares no blame at all for the $1.3 million deficit we ran in fiscal year 2011. And I feel really betrayed by the professionals that worked for us last year, because we were under the impression up until January 2012 that we closed the books on that fiscal year in balance.
Right.
So we were misled. And the council's 7 volunteers. We depend on the professionals that are working for the City of New London to give us good information. And that's, to me, there's just, but that's a hard fact. 1.3 million in the hole. The auditors, have audited the books. They told us that's a fact. It's frustrating this year because we can't get a handle on where we're at, money-wise.
That's kind of where I'm at. I was trying to figure out where we're at because the mayor had his State of the City address, and he specifically, I think, pretty specifically laid out what the issue was. Not enough revenue. I think he referred to, not by name, the lower our taxes referendums where we didn't raise the mill rate when we probably should have.
I don't buy that. I don't buy any of that.
Okay.
I just don't buy it. The taxpayers decide how much money they're going to pay to support this government, and we provide the government that they give us the money to pay for. That's it. We have a responsibility to do that. You can't just spend more money than the people say you can have.
So you disagree with that assertion?
Absolutely.
And many of the assertions that he's made, as far as over-predicting.
Yeah, that's no. Well, there might have been, there were mistakes made in this budget.
Well, clearly.
There were mistakes.
$1.3 million behind.
Well, that was FY11.
Right.
And this budget, I think that the finance director has identified, has clearly identified mistakes that were made in this budget. One of them, the biggest one, is that there was a mistake made in the recreation department budget and the youth services. They counted grant money twice or something. I mean, but it's a big a big chunk of money, and it was a mistake, and it looks like it was a mistake. How that, you know, I mean, well, humans make mistakes, so there's going to be mistakes in everything, in every endeavor we engage in, but that was definitely a mistake. Some of the revenues, I think some of the revenues were optimistic, and what wasn't built into the formula was that the revenue stream might be interrupted by the change in government. One thing I think that was unwise was to just dismiss the previous director of Public Works without even meeting him, without having any kind of a handoff or any kind of a transfer. That just doesn't make any sense to me. That person, out of anybody in the previous government, was running this city.
And I've heard of that.
And he was really doing a really good job. And I would have, and he was such a consummate professional. You could have sat and said, there's no future for you here. Would you mind helping us through the next 6 months?
Right.
And this guy would have done it.
Right.
But to just, you know, fire him overnight and not even debrief him or find out, you know, really what needs to be done to keep the revenues uninterrupted, I just didn't see the wisdom in that.
It was a misstep.
Absolutely.
Well, where I'm at now is I'm ready to just try. What we have to do this year is limit our losses, not spend anything we don't need to spend. I'm not sure that's being done. I'm being told it's being done, but you know, from my anecdotal observations, I don't think we've tightened the spending enough. However, I do look forward to making it to June 30, closing the books on this year, and having a good budget in place for next year, and there'll be no excuses. We stay within that budget, period.
Right. And this is the government we wanted, we voted for, right? The accountable government, the strong mayor, the council that is a balance to that mayor?
So, you know, I have a different theory on all that.
Okay.
When we changed the charter, essentially what was done was, if like you do a global search in your document, everywhere it said city manager, we replaced it with mayor.
Okay.
It was no great change. There's no power this mayor has the city manager didn't have. And that was part of the problems you referred to. Mike Passero wanted Billy Dittman as the chief, but Marty Berliner decided to pick Peg Ackley, and the charter gave him absolute authority to pick the police chief.
Right.
City council had no say. And in fact, the vote of the city council 6-1 to hire Bill Dittman was a violation of the charter. The city council has no say in that, had no right to intermeddle in that. But then, by the same token, why does Marty Berlin, as talented as city manager he was, there was a problem when somebody that just came into the city as in a temporary position was able to install a police chief against the will, really, of the council. So now at least we have an elected official that holds the power that the city manager had. But he essentially has the same powers the city manager had. The only difference is he doesn't work for council. He's elected in his own right, and he can thumb his nose at the council.
He works for the citizens.
Exactly, which I think is healthy. He can veto, whereas a city manager, if we pass an ordinance, had to execute the ordinance. In reality, a good city manager could figure out a way around it anyway.
Sure.
Okay, but the mayor can just simply veto it.
And you can override that veto?
We can.
With a 6-1?
6-1.
6-1.
And essentially, it's a city manager that has to be elected, has to stand for election every 4 years. The problem I wanted to solve, the reason I supported this sort of change was, in my lifetime, we essentially had 2 city managers. One was here for 24 years, the other one was here for 18 years.
Right.
That's not healthy.
And not a lot of growth in that time.
It was a dictatorship.
Yeah.
Things haven't gone well. It's time to try something new.
And we're doing it.
But I think the council, maybe we were naive. We believed we were going to elect somebody into that position. They were going to take the desk in the city manager's office. Gail was going to be the secretary, and life was going to go on. Nobody conceived that we were going to create an administration like we ended up creating.
And going forward with this administration, in cooperation and as adversaries,
I don't believe we're at.
Well, I mean, potentially, you know, if it comes down to it and there are vetoes and there are
we're
overturns.
We're all trying to do the best for the city of New London, and we're going to disagree.
Well, and there it was. I think
That's all.
answering my
And
question before
I think, you know, we can disagree without being disagreeable, as the saying goes. A civil debate is how we'll move the ball forward. Nobody has a monopoly on the right answers.
There you go.
You know, I certainly don't. And I don't think any individual has a monopoly on the right answers. We have to have a public debate. We have to build consensus. And when we get agreement, we move forward. The thing that will destroy us is if somebody thinks they've got the answer and they're going to force it down everybody's throat. That's not our form of government.
Well, that is very much what I'm trying to accomplish with these interviews. And I think we can wrap it up. I want to thank you for having this conversation with me. And appeal to everyone who watches it, and to you and to me, to stay accountable, to stay vigilant, to ask the questions, to say, I support this, I don't support that, and to be agreeable while disagreeing. Thank you very much, Mr. Passero.
Thank you for having me.